I build AI agents that write newsletters for me, and the content is actually good. It used to take me over 3 hours to write my newsletter. Now it takes me about 10 minutes to edit my newsletter. And it's working really well for me. My newsletter has an over 11% click-through rate, and several marketers at Fortune 500 companies read my newsletter. Let me give you a quick demo, and then I'll show you how I built it and why it works so you can build your own. I'm building a curation newsletter. In other words, my newsletter curates the best news and resources and tools in the world of AI for marketers. You can clip YouTube videos and podcasts, and it will automatically get those transcribed and then write about the podcast with the key takeaways. You can include tweets and LinkedIn posts, including Twitter threads, because Twitter is where a lot of the action is in AI right now. And you can include articles as well. So I'm going to go ahead and give you a demo and show you how easy it is and show you how it turns out. So all I do is click the Zapier plugin, Ambinotion, and then I'm going to enter the category. In other words, this is like the section of my newsletter that I want this to be included in. So I want this particular YouTube video to be included in the resource section of my newsletter. I'll click resource, click send, and now it's getting added to Notion and being transcribed. Here's an article from Andreessen Horowitz on their thesis for AI in marketing, clip, and I'm going to put this in the news section, and this corresponds to the prompt. So each section of the newsletter is written in a different style, so it's not just boring summaries throughout the newsletter. Send, and again, here's a really interesting tweet about how to market AI agents, and I'm going to put this in the additional section of my newsletter, so it's going to be written in a completely different third way. Send. Cool. It's already populated in Notion. The transcription, of course, is going to take a little bit longer than the rest. YouTubes and podcasts are going to take a little bit longer because it needs to transcribe. There's an extra step there, but you can see the others are already starting to populate. And then what it'll do is start writing the draft. So it's already writing the content for the newsletter, and then it will compile it into this draft section that can just be copy and pasted right into Beehive, which is the newsletter service that I'm using. And so I have these resource, additional, and news sections. And then I also have agents that write other sections of the newsletter as well. So I have an agent that writes the subject line, and I have an agent that writes the introduction. And then I have an agent that writes the highlights in the beginning of the newsletter so you can see what's ahead. So this is kind of the standard newsletter format that you would see for anything like Morning Brew, Milk Road, a lot of the popular newsletters. Those two in particular have actually gotten acquired for tens of millions of dollars, and they're basically curating news articles and doing it in a really engaging way. That's what this does. So here's the draft. It's already getting populated. And then as I add more links, so for example, that YouTube video resource that I mentioned is still getting populated, it's going to rewrite the intro and the highlights section just as I keep adding links throughout the week. So I'll let that resource YouTube video finish, and that should take about 5 minutes. And then I'll show you the finished product, which can just be copied and pasted right into Beehive. Here in the draft section, I'm getting 3 different subject line options, and I can of course edit these. These can at least be like ideas for me to work with that will spark other ideas, but these actually look quite solid to me and I might use these. A quick little friendly intro. It's giving me 3 different options that I can choose from, and I can edit them as well. And it's being instructed on how to do this, so it's not just like some boring introduction. And then here is the highlights that quickly give the reader a quick overview of what's included. And then, like I said, we have each section written in a completely different style and format. So this is the news article from A16Z, and it will cite the source and include the link. And here is the resource YouTube video I sent. And then in the additional section, it gives me 2 different options of just a short copywriting for the additional section. This is just like a rapid fire section that I include at the end of the newsletter. So from here, all I have to do is click the copy button. So this is the template I have set up in Beehive. Just go in here, paste special. I have to do a little bit of formatting. Unfortunately, Beehive doesn't allow Zapier to send stuff directly to it. So a little bit of formatting, and then I just edit it right in here. And like I said, that takes me about 10 minutes to do. And I have a newsletter. So why does this work? This works for 3 reasons. The first is that I'm adding my own unique substance to the newsletter. I'm not relying on OpenAI or ChatGPT's training data for the content of my newsletter, or I'm not relying on ChatGPT or AI's judgment on what my readers are going to be interested in. I'm saying this is what's interesting, include this data specifically, write only about this specific data. right? So that makes a huge difference. I call that substance. Add your unique substance to your content, whether it's a newsletter or otherwise. So that's what I'm doing when I'm clipping the links and telling it what to do. So if we look at my prompts, we go to the system instructions that I'm using in the assistants. You can see that I am prompting it to use only the content that the user sends and not include any outside resources. And then I'm using Zapier to automatically use this user input section. And in the prompt in Zapier, it's basically saying, here's the news content, right, only based on this. So that's how I'm making sure that I'm only using the unique substance that I want it to use. In other words, it's using the content, it's writing about what I want it to write about. I'm not letting it write about its own training data. The second reason why this works and why the content turns out well is because in my prompts for each section of the newsletter, each of those agents that I mentioned, I am giving specific writing style instructions. So I'm not just telling it to summarize the news. That's going to give you really boring robotic writing style. And I am giving it specific copywriting style instructions that are matched to my brand voice that I'm going for with my newsletter. And so the copywriting is actually good. And I do still do a little bit of editing at the end, but it gets it very close. Again, it saves me about 80 to 90% of the time. It carves off this workflow. And the third reason why this workflow works is because I am using agents. And so agents are basically, well, at least for what I'm doing here, it's basically very specialized prompts for each part of the newsletter. So if I were to write a prompt that is basically like, write a newsletter, that's actually a lot for one prompt for an AI to handle, at least today. There's a lot of nuance that needs to go into each individual section. And by writing individual prompts for each section, the quality is going to be a lot better. So even something like the subject line, which is actually extremely important, even though it's usually only like a few words, maybe five, 6, 7 words, those words really matter a lot. And I have a dedicated prompt just to write the subject line. And it's writing that subject line based on the content of the newsletter. So I'm not just getting, some generic subject line. It's all based on what the content is actually included in the newsletter. In other words, what I just clipped. I'm using Zapier to have the agents coordinate and collaborate with each other. So I basically just built automation within Zapier to get them to interact. So things like getting the intro agent to write based on the content of the newsletter. So there's interactivity based on how I update the body of the newsletter. And I'm using a few tools to help me do this. First is the Zapier web clipper. So all I need to do is clip a link that I want to include or a piece of content that I want to include using the Zapier web clipper. And then I'm using Notion. And from Notion, it connects to OpenAI assistants that then run prompts, and the prompts write the content in a style that is actually good. So it's in my desired copywriting style. You don't get that robotic or boring, just like a summary. It's actually written in a brand voice that I want. And I call this an invisible integration. So it's integrating AI into the tools that I'm already using. In this case, primarily Notion, as well as the Zapier. So I don't even have to log into OpenAI. I don't have to use a new app or get used to a new interface. It's embedded in my own workflow. You can use the same workflow on other tools as well. This could be set up in Google Sheets or Airtable or pretty much anything else that integrates with Zapier. I'll just show you a comparison of just doing this right in ChatGPT so you can see why this is so powerful and why the quality turns out so much better. So here I'll start with just write a newsletter about all the best news that happened this week about AI for marketers. So first off, it's pretty generic. All it is like 6 links and a conclusion, no introduction, no highlights. It looks like it's all written in the same exact style. Also, I don't think that ChatGPT 4o has recent training data. I think all of its training data is based on old, so I didn't even think it would be able to write this because it doesn't have access to what happened this week yet. I think it will in the future. But it's interesting that it included that OpenAI launched ChatGPT 5. So let's see what happened. Let's ask it about that. Did OpenAI launch ChatGPT 5? Where can I use it and learn more? Right. So no, OpenAI has not launched ChatGPT. So it doesn't have access to the latest training data. So you have to give it to training data. It's just like if you're making other kinds of content, it doesn't know your stories. It doesn't know your insights unless you give it the insights. So you have to give it substance. So that's what I'm doing with this workflow. Even if I wasn't trying to get it news, it would still not be in a really good style. So that's the other benefit of giving it specific copywriting instructions. So it writes the way I want to write. Like this resource link is like bulleted out with the key takeaways. So it's about 5 key challenges. It gives you the 5 key challenges, right? And it's not just a boring summary like this. So why do companies do newsletters? What's the marketing and business goals that it helps it achieve? Obviously, if you're a media company, you can just monetize through sponsorships and advertising. But if you're at a software services company or even a physical product company, obviously you're trying to sell a product or service and get your target customers to actually buy from you. Why would a B2B company do a newsletter? So the common stat that you'll hear in the B2B world is that 95% of your buyers at any given time are not in market to buy, and only 5% are actively in market to buy. So basically there's this huge opportunity to capture the biggest chunk of your market before they're ready to buy and then get them to buy from you. Well, why would you want to do that? A couple of reasons. One is once people are in market to buy, that's typically very expensive. That takes a lot of time and money to convert those buyers. So first off, once people are doing keyword searches, for example, like your product category or even branded searches like for your competitors, those types of like high intent keywords, those keywords tend to be really expensive. And if you're using the other publicly available signals that other companies are using, you're basically in high competition. And, once somebody sort of gets into that mode, that's when you're going to spend more resources on sales. That's when you're going to spend more resources on things like sales enablement and account-based marketing, which all tend to be pretty expensive. Whereas when you're attracting the 95% of buyers that are out of market, that tends to be a lot less expensive. So right now with my newsletter, I'm acquiring subscribers for a little under $3 a subscriber. And I think I can get that down to closer to $2 a subscriber by optimizing my top of funnel growth strategy and execution. But that is pretty cheap compared to competing for in-market buyers. And even for the in-market buyers, it's very rare that somebody is just going to click an ad or receive a cold email and then become a customer, especially if you're offering something that's expensive. Like most B2B things, like particularly anything like B2B or anything selling to big companies like the enterprise, when you're talking about like 50 to 100K plus a year contracts, those don't just happen instantly. A lot of things need to happen. The old saying, people buy from people who they know, like, and trust. That's true. You're going to generally need more touch points than just an ad or a cold email, and content can get you there. So just to share some more data on this concept. So Winter, a B2B market research company, did a big study on marketing and revenue leaders and how they buy software. And they shared some really interesting points. So here's the CEO of Winter saying, so how do B2B SaaS marketing leaders buy software? So to simplify, they build a short list, largely influenced by peer recommendations, brand fame, aka content, third-party reviews, and Google search results. They narrow that list to just 3 companies to get a demo. So you really want to be in that short list. And just getting some more detail on that. So again, the CEO Pep says 42% start by looking into specific vendors from the get-go. So that's a big chunk, and you really want to be in that specific list of vendors, in that short list of vendors. So how do you get in that specific list of vendors? Well, we have some data on that too. This is a chart showing what plays the biggest role in determining which vendors you're going to consider. Word of mouth, this is like referrals, networking, asking your peers and getting recommendations from people you know and trust, either your network or people in your communities. Third-party review sites. A lot of those sites are pay to play to some extent. So we'll see if these continue to be a big influence on the buying process. But here you can see that vendor content is a really big influence. So, again, if somebody knows and likes you and trusts you, they're going to be more likely to buy you and consider your product or service when they are in market to buy. And so content, whether it's a newsletter or LinkedIn content or a podcast or, all the various forums, can be a great way to essentially build relationships at scale and also to change the way that people think. So you can sort of evangelize your strategic narrative, evangelize the points of view that you have on the market, build positive brand and product association so people understand like what you actually do and the value of it, right? So these are all things that content can do, including newsletters. And then the specific benefit of a newsletter is that you can get much better first-party data and higher engagement. So for example, compared to like LinkedIn content, also referred to as zero-click content, there's only so much data that you're going to get about who's interacting with you. Whereas if they're on your email list, you have their email address. And from there, you can enrich it with data, and you can also do targeted campaigns. So if they're a good fit for your product and service, you can do targeted outreach to them via email instead of LinkedIn, where LinkedIn is not really the place to be doing like broad level sales pitches. But it's not an either or thing. Like, it's a great piece to add to like your sort of middle or bottom of funnel as well. You can use it for top of funnel and just drive like cold traffic to your newsletter via ads and other sources. But it can also be a great complement to LinkedIn content. So, again, as you're putting out LinkedIn content to your entire market, all of the people in your ICP, again, only like 5% of them are going to be in market to buy. And so as those people are reading your LinkedIn content, the other 95% might otherwise bounce unless you offer them something else that they do want now, such as a newsletter. And again, once they're on your newsletter, you can build a stronger relationship with them. You can get them into your way of thinking about the world, and you're at less risk of any algorithm changes, which do sometimes happen because now you own the email address and you're not dependent on LinkedIn or whatever other platform showing them your content. So that's why you've seen companies like HubSpot really invest in media. They acquired a newsletter called The Hustle. They've built their own podcasts and other forms of content. And I think the strategy is largely, again, like reaching people before they're in market to buy, because that's what you need to do in order to get into consideration sets and to reduce your cost of customer acquisition. And here's just a quick summary of how B2B SaaS revenue leaders buy products, and you want to tap into that behavior. So it starts with requirements gathering and then building an initial consideration set, shortlisting the final 3 to get a demo, and then getting a demo. So, again, you really want to be in that consideration set to really have a chance of winning the deal, and a newsletter can help you do that. So how do you get started with using AI for your newsletter? Well, if you already have a newsletter that you're happy with and it's working well for you, it's pretty easy. You basically have AI analyze your existing content, analyze the writing style, and then turn that into prompts. I've covered that in several other videos, including this one. So check out that video on my channel. If you have different sections, have it analyze each section of your newsletter and come up with a specific prompt for that tone. If you don't already have a newsletter, I would recommend creating the first few versions yourself first and then automating it from there. And the reason being is that prompt engineering is a lot easier when you have an example that you're happy with. It actually helps to put examples right in the prompt, but it really helps to know what you're asking AI to do. It's almost like when you're working with like a designer or a freelance writer, it really helps to just have examples that you can both see and react to, just because a lot of times people use different words to describe things, especially when you're talking about writing. It's kind of subjective. Different types of tones and styles mean different things to different people. So working with the human, you want to get on the same page with AI. And so reverse engineering your prompts based on your existing content really helps. Get the prompts to write in your desired style and brand voice based on having it analyze content that's in your style and brand voice. But step 1 is thinking about your goals. What are your marketing and business goals for your newsletter? That should really inform what content goes into your newsletter. Like, what is the concept of your newsletter? My concept is the news and new trends, new tools, new hot takes. It's all very like recent. That's the concept behind my newsletter. But that's mostly because it's, at least for now, it's mostly a media business model. I'll eventually be looking to get sponsorships for it, but I'll also be using it to market my own products once those products get further along. But for you, are your goals to evangelize your strategic narrative? Is it to create a category? Is it to educate people about a problem that they don't know they have. Depending on what your goals are, your content that you include, the concept of your newsletter could be very different. Or maybe your goals are just purely lead generation. So maybe you have like a lower cost product where your TAM, your totally addressable market, a higher percentage of your ICPs is willing and able to buy at any given time. In that case, the newsletter could just be a little bit more of a direct response channel potentially. I have less experience in that sphere. Most of my experience is in B2B and particularly like high ACV enterprise type stuff where buyers don't just get up and buy 50 to 100K contracts and change everything that they're already doing and gut their existing systems and processes and workflows and just changes. That doesn't just happen overnight. So you kind of want to start building that relationship early on. But depending on your business, your market, your goals, inform your content based on that. See if a newsletter is right for you. And just really think about like what AI can do for you and what it can't do for you. So I have a pretty strong point of view that you should not rely on ChatGPT's training data for your content. I think you should be bringing your insights to the content and to your prompts. So if you're writing about news, you should be telling it what news to include. You should be telling it what content to include. You should be providing unique insights and points of view. And ChatGPT doesn't have that. If they did, it wouldn't be a unique insight or point of view, right? So you want to be bringing that to the table and bringing that to your content, no matter what it is. Taking a step back, I would say like, don't expect ChatGPT to have insights about your customers. You want to be the one who knows what your customers want, how they think now, how you want to get them to think. You do not want to rely on ChatGPT to help you with that. And again, like I think it's like if ChatGPT has the customer insight, it's not really an insight. So I think customer insights are a pretty big competitive advantage today. And you want to be getting those yourself and bringing those to the table and doing what you think, not what ChatGPT thinks. I also think AI is currently not yet great at strategy. So I don't think ChatGPT is necessarily going to help you think about if you should be doing a newsletter in the first place. And if so, what that newsletter should be about, like what the concept should be. I think that's on you. I have talked to some people who are using AI to help with strategy. And I think there's some opportunities there. I just personally haven't done it yet. So I'm not necessarily going to recommend it. I can see how it could be done with the right tools and techniques. But at this point, I think that strategy and customer insights should be done by humans. And you should also be designing your brand voice. You should be telling AI what style you want. You should not be relying on AI to tell you what style or copywriting techniques to use. And that's mostly because if you don't tell it what to do, it's going to give you the robotic style that nobody likes. So you want to bring that to the table and design your own brand voice and content strategy. I'm running a live video workshop called the 10-Minute Newsletter, where I go into all the details on how to fully automate your newsletter and transition your workflow from 3 hours of writing to about 10 minutes of editing. Check it out in the description below and use the discount code YouTube for $20 off.